A new 25% tariff on cars and light trucks not made in the U.S. effective April 2nd.
David, it looks like now components are going to be tariffed on top of the assembled vehicle tariff of 25%.
Economic uncertainty surrounding the North American auto industry. The big three are navigating a new era as they deal with the impact of President Trump's tariff.
Donald Trump has repeatedly described Canada as mean and unfair, and now his comments are echoing into something much bigger than political jabs. Across Canada, people are pulling back from American-made products, not through protests, not through boycotts with signs and megaphones, but through one quiet choice at a time. And the most visible sign of that shift is sitting on dealership lots. For decades, Canadians bought American cars almost by default. Ford, GM, and Chrysler dominated the roads. But over the last year, something unexpected happened. Something no one announced and no politician campaigned for. Canadians simply stopped choosing U.S.-made vehicles at the rate they used to. They didn't make speeches about it. They just changed their spending habits. The numbers tell the story more loudly than any politician. For the first time since the 1990s, Canada imported more vehicles from Mexico in a single month than from the United States. In June alone, roughly 1.08 billion Canadian dollars worth of cars came from Mexico. Meanwhile, imports from the U.S. dropped to around 950 million. That's not a small shift. That's a break in a pattern that held steady for more than 30 years. And this didn't happen because Canadians suddenly discovered new brands or developed new tastes. It happened because the math changed. When Canada matched the U.S. with 25% tariffs on vehicles that didn't comply with North American rules, the price of many U.S.-made cars shot upward. Not a little, thousands of dollars per vehicle. For families already struggling with higher interest rates and inflation, that difference pushed American models from maybe to too expensive. Meanwhile, Japanese and Korean models built right here in Ontario and Quebec slid neatly into the gap. Cars like the RAV4, the Honda CR-V, and the Civic, all assembled on Canadian soil, became the obvious choice. They were easier to get, cheaper after the tariffs, and didn't come with the uncertainty surrounding U.S.-built models. Plants in Cambridge and Woodstock even held the unique distinction of being the only North American facilities building certain Lexus and Toyota models, and they kept producing. It's not just that Canadian consumers changed, it's that American companies had already been retreating. Long before tariffs made headlines, the Detroit Three, Ford, GM, and Stellantis were slowly shrinking their footprint in Canada. Ford closed its Oakville plant after canceling an EV project. Stellantis stopped building the Chrysler 300 in Brampton and delayed restarting Jeep production. GM lost a huge chunk of its duty-free quota for failing to meet Canadian production commitments. By the time 2025 arrived, U.S. automakers weren't the backbone of Canadian manufacturing anymore. They were barely holding on. Union leaders warned that Donald Trump's rhetoric and his policies could damage the Canadian auto sector even further. Their argument was simple. Trump talks about supporting workers. But in 2019, when Canadian and American auto workers went on strike for 40 days, Trump stayed silent. He didn't intervene. He didn't negotiate. He didn't show up. Now, they say, the same pattern is repeating. As American production faded, Toyota and Honda surged. Their plants operated steadily, their supply chains tightened, and their sales climbed. In fact, they now make more than 2/3 of all vehicles produced in Canada. That level of dominance didn't happen overnight. It came from years of consistent output while American brands scaled back, and then the tariffs hit. The new 25% counter tariff on non-compliant U.S.-built vehicles since 2020, more than 46 billion Canadian dollars have poured into Canada's EV ecosystem. New battery plants, new supply lines, new assembly hubs. Honda's massive $15 billion EV project, which spans everything from material processing to final assembly, is one of the clearest signs of how quickly the center of gravity is shifting. As Ontario and Quebec expanded their production capacity, Canadian supply chains strengthened. The auto parts sector saw GDP climb from around $8 billion to $10 billion. Employment passed 80,000 workers. Factories ran smoother. Prices stayed stable even as U.S. prices rose. This is the part no one wants to say out loud. Canada is quietly becoming less dependent on U.S. auto manufacturing and more capable of standing on its own. And this is where the story turns into something larger, something deeper than a simple tariff dispute. A silent boycott has taken shape. Not because Canadians hate American cars, not because Donald Trump insulted Canada, not because politicians organized anything, but because the numbers made the decision for them. When one set of cars gets more expensive and the alternatives stay stable, consumers go where the value is. A 5% or 10% price difference can shift an entire market. Add a few $1,000s to the sticker price, and you can flip decades of consumer loyalty in a matter of months. That is exactly what happened. Canadian shoppers didn't march, protest, or declare opposition. They simply stopped traveling across the border to buy cars. They stopped filling U.S. gas stations on weekend trips. They stopped shopping in American outlet malls. They stopped visiting border town dealerships, and businesses in Michigan, New York, and Ohio felt the absence immediately. What's more, the political side of this is almost irrelevant. You can negotiate with a protest, you can meet with a union, you can bargain with a government, but you cannot negotiate with a shift in consumer behavior. And while U.S. states struggled with the fallout, slower production, higher costs, thinning orders, Canada moved in the opposite direction. Investment accelerated. Production stayed strong. And the EV transition, still uncertain and chaotic in the U.S., found stability north of the border. Now, a new auto landscape is forming, quietly, steadily, almost invisibly. North America is no longer defined by the old pattern where Detroit leads and everyone else follows. Instead, a three-country system is emerging, but the balance is changing. Mexico is rising, Canada is rising, and the U.S. is being forced to rethink its place. The Canadian market that once guaranteed demand for American cars is now helping reshape the entire continent's auto industry. And that raises a much bigger question, one that Washington hasn't answered yet. Can the United States accept a future where Canadian consumer choices carry more influence than American trade policy? The North American auto sector isn't collapsing. It's reorganizing. And it's doing so quietly enough that most people haven't realized how dramatic the long-term impact may be. One shift in buying habits changed decades of trade. One tariff decision pushed consumers toward entirely different brands. One miscalculation turned into a continental realignment. So the real question is, if such a small change can reshape something as massive as the auto industry, what other parts of the economy might be more fragile than they appear? Thanks for watching until the end. If you want to keep following these stories as they develop, stories that reveal the deeper economic currents shaping North America, be sure to like and subscribe. There's much more ahead.